Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Synergy Group's private invitation-only showcase this afternoon in collaboration with Makersite. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. I hope everyone's doing well this afternoon. So we've got over 30 senior procurement leaders in attendance across Europe today, and we're going to be discussing how procurement can spearhead the transition to net zero. Really hot topic for everybody in procurement right now. More specifically, though, we're going to be looking into what innovations does procurement need today that will make a decisive impact in reducing, or a decisive difference in reducing impacts. How can procurement shape a company's sustainability strategy? So not just through purchasing decisions, but by influencing how the products of tomorrow are made. And finally, how can procurement teams model sustainability, cost, regulations, and risk analysis at the same time? In terms of the agenda today, there's going to be a keynote from our thought leader and VP at Makersite, Julian Weitz. This is going to be followed by an audience Q&A, and then 3 of our panelists that will be coming onto the virtual stage to join the conversation from the audience. We hope everybody enjoys this afternoon's event. I'll hand you over to Julian now, our speaker for this afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for participating. I'm with the introduction of Mitch, not much to add. I'm part of the management team here at Makersite. I lead our go-to-market operations, so anything from sales, marketing to partnerships. And I'm excited to speak with you today about procurement's role within the sustainability journey of manufacturing companies and how procurement can really spearhead the transition that companies are now undergoing. We as a software as a service company that helps manufacturing enterprises achieve a net zero state, accelerate innovation and de-risk supply chains, have a large user base of ours being procurement professionals like yours. So what I really want to do today is share experiences that we have had with our customers and how they're tackling the difficulties and the challenges that procurement faces in terms of making more sustainable supplier choices, and with it transform the procurement and supplier base. We are a software as a service company that's headquartered in Germany. We are a very fast growing company that is, as of now, a bit more than 50 employees. And we're predominantly focused on tailoring to enterprise manufacturers. We have experiences across various different industries, and our software in its use is also industry agnostic. But we do see a certain pull in certain industries where there's just already a stronger drive within procurement and product engineering when it comes to sustainability. On one hand, that's heavy manufacturing and industries, companies like Vestas that work with us who build large wind turbines, the electronic space where we are working with companies like Microsoft or Barco, the automotive space where there's heavy pressure, especially on the supply chain, the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 suppliers, where we work with companies like Cummins and Schaeffler, and as well the chemicals and pharmaceutical space where we work with the likes of Bayer, for example. We're a company that exists already since 2018, and besides myself, the leadership has a strong background in supply chain domain expertise and sustainability domain expertise. And the most recent milestone that we've had is that we have actually closed the largest Series A funding round within the sustainability software space within Europe, which was just end of last year in October, a round of 19 million in funding. Now, enough about us as a software company. We are here today to speak about the challenges that procurement is facing and the ways that procurement can leverage technologies to become better in transforming companies to a net zero state. What we observe with every company is that traditionally the decision basis in order to understand what material is more sustainable to source for a product, which supplier it is better to source from, these analyses, these take a long time. You need experts actually to make these analyses, depending as well on complexity of what you're purchasing. These analyses, they can take multiple days, weeks, if not even months, if we're talking complex motors, electronics, for example. And unfortunately, as of now, there's around 20,000 experts around the globe. We call them life cycle assessment experts that actually have the know-how to do these analyses. The issue is, though, companies around the globe employ around 35 million product engineers and more than 25 million procurement professionals that are heavily dependent on these experts if they actually want to embed sustainability as a decision criteria. So plainly speaking, it's an issue that you actually cannot solve with warm bodies because there's just not enough expertise going around. Then the other issue that companies usually have is that enterprise architectures and enterprise systems store data pretty siloed. While you as procurement professionals have a lot of data in your ERP system when it comes to suppliers and the materials and the components that you purchase, there's a lot of valuable information sitting in other departments and their software landscape. A lot of information is sitting with the product design department, the product management department. A lot of information is sitting within compliance about what substances go in your ready purchased products, for example. So we see that with larger companies, a lot of times it can be that the data needed to actually solve sustainability challenges and analyses is spread across 20 or more systems. And then there is the other part that some data is simply not available. You might have had already the situation that you were tasked to make more sustainable supplier choices, but a range of your suppliers is either way not willing yet, or they do not yet have a product carbon footprint calculated for what they're selling to you. What to do then? That's the other piece. Generally as well, looking at complex products or complex supply chains, it's hard to understand what your supply chain actually looks like beyond just tier one and what that means in terms of CO2 emissions coming from the supply chain. And then really the issue of granularity. If your company has already potentially addressed scope 3, there might be a corporate carbon footprint calculation, and this actually concerns procurement in a sense that scope 3 are in category 1 are all the things that you as procurement professionals purchase. But most likely in that corporate carbon footprint, what your sustainability folks have done is they use the spend-based approach or a volume-based approach, where they would categorize your procurement spend, throw it into categories, let's say, for example, steel, and every different variation of steel gradients, every supplier that you source from, it will all be thrown in one bucket, and every euro or dollar of spend will be attached a CO2 emission, one CO2 emission for this entire bucket. That is, of course, missing any actionability or granularity to identify who you should source from, because what really you can do as procurement professionals based on that analysis or that type of reporting is spend less money in order for the carbon emissions to go down. Now, on one hand, the spend in reality has very little correlation with the carbon emissions of your procurement of your procured products. And on the other side, with certain products around the market, when we look at steel, for example, or semiconductors and electronics, which are rare and expensive to procure, you will rather be in the situation that you have to spend more going forward rather than less. And then the other aspect is looking at just the area of sustainability. It doesn't help you drive decisions. You will not now or going forward just make a decision on a supplied good solely based on the carbon emissions. Because when you make a sustainable procurement choice, it will always need to be in context of commercial parameters, risk parameters, and as well regulation parameters. Because quite frankly, at the end of the day, it's businesses, you are a part of a business, and a business needs to have healthy commercials. It needs to adhere to rules. It needs to improve and become more sustainable for the future to come. But only sustainability will not result in a functioning business going forward. And what I want to give you an outlook very shortly of before I tell you about how different companies around the globe already apply technologies to help procurement professionals like yours. I want to give you an idea of how we solve it. We have identified these challenges that I've just told you about, And starting with this lack of experts, how we solved it is these analyses of analyzing every component that you have within your purchases, analyzing it supplier specific to a granularity that you will not look at steel in terms of a bucket, but you will actually understand, should I procure my steel from ArcelorMittal, or should I procure my steel from Tata Steel or from ThyssenKrupp? Having this supplier specific granularity so you see these differences. This is what we are solving, and these analyses we have turned from multiple weeks and months to mere minutes. And the way we have done this is we have, in theory, built the world's largest supply chain and material database. In theory, because we have not built a database of our own, but we have actually built a software as a service platform that connects by now to more than 140 external, premium, and verified databases. These databases withhold relevant information across suppliers, materials around the globe, risk, sustainability, cost, and compliance. Overall, our supply chain databases itself make up already today around 30% of the global supply chains. But what we do, and where we really generate this high value for our customers, is we take millions of data points from our customer systems, predominantly the ERP system and the PLM system. Any data that's supplier relevant, material information, product information, or process information, and it is being put into our platform, and we map it versus these external databases. An outcome, digital twins of products, of materials, and how they're made, and the ability to analyze these across sustainability, cost, compliance, and risk. And this instantly and fully automated, so that you do not rely on experts for every step of a procurement decision, and that you can instantly have the ability to analyze when you want to make a procurement decision, and you have the ability to look at it from multiple criteria. It's important to understand here as well, our technology approach is not that we're telling you we are the next solution that procurement needs to adapt with a new user interface. We are the solution that, quite frankly, can easily just be integrated with your ERP system. So that data can, or any system where your procurement professionals sit, and that data can therefore enable people or your procurement folks in the systems where you're already making decisions today. And we're helping really across that entire journey that procurement plays in the sustainability journey of a company to net zero. On one hand, it is about measurement, really having the ability to measure every little screw that you're procuring on a supplier specific level. Having as well the ability of how your procurement decisions impact not only the corporate level, but also the product level. Because we do not only look at scope 3, but we also do of your own company's products fully automated lifecycle assessments. So that when you are actually early on in the design phase involved by your product engineering, you have the ability to really understand who you should supply from and what is the best supplier profile for a sustainable product version of the product of your company. And once that measurement part has been done inside your organization, and you have basically coverage across all the dimensions on terms of the scope 3 categories for all the procurement spent in your organization, you can then start collecting more accurate information. And this is where we are facilitating an automated questionnaire functionality, where you can send in periods these questionnaires to your suppliers, and they will basically just receive an email, which they can then fill out with the information that you want to gather, which most likely for these initiatives will be a product carbon footprint for the supplied goods. And Makersite will automatically retrieve that information through these questionnaires, create data objects, and therefore on a constant basis, update your supplier data in terms of their sustainability impact. And you will therefore have a tool that you can use to gradually build up more and more accurate and primary data. You can as well then, when you manage these, manage your journey, you can use our platform to forecast how, based on future sales, and future purchases, your emissions will reduce. And you can integrate as well this data, of course, externally with other systems, either way your corporate ESG platform or sustainability reporting solution, a business intelligence tooling, or your ERP software. Essentially, reduction you achieve through not only looking at sustainability, but really operationalizing a multi-criteria decision approach, where you as procurement professionals in line with your board need to decide, what are we going to focus on? I've been at a conference last year where, for example, Siemens have shared how they are weighting sustainability versus cost, risk, and regulation in terms of what is more important when they're looking at it from a supplier choice for a certain material. So you really need to align a strategy where you have just, let's say, 30%, 25% weighting on sustainability, or whatever that percentage is. You understand what is more important, whether it's cost, risk, and really make a decision matrix. And what we do as a solution provider is enable this kind of decision matrix across all the purchase components from every supplier that you have, so that you can make a decision instantly based on instant data that is provided to you. Now, with various different customers from different industries, and we have also software partners that we're integrating with to help our customers even more. To just give you an idea of how we're helping different companies out there, Microsoft, as one of the largest cloud providers in the world, and also a very large seller of consumer devices in terms of electronics like tablets, the Xbox, phones, actually uses Makersite to really measure every component impact across the entire value chain of their hardware. So every screw, every integrated circuit, every entire server that they are running in the cloud, they measure the sustainability impact with our platform, and can really enable, especially on their use case, the product engineering and the product management in collaboration with procurement, to understand how they can build the products of the future, with the ability to make these what-if considerations and see what is the best choice for us from a company strategy perspective, aligning sustainability, but as well commercial and risk parameters. With Schaeffler, we had a bit of a different case, which is more procurement and supply chain related. They had actually already found out what they wanted to do. They came with the problem that their concentration of rare earth metals is solely in China. I think it was a bit above 90%. And for some reasons, they wanted to diversify these supply chains of the rare earth metals that go into magnets in their products. And they had already identified different supply chain variations based on cost, based on risk. But their board said, well, if we're changing a crucial supply chain of ours, we need to think about sustainability as a procurement parameter, because we have committed by 2030 a reduction of 25%. With that in mind, any decision that we're taking on future supply chains needs to align with that strategic goal. And what we therefore did for them is all these supply chains that they already understood they're able to source from or mine rare earth metals and then process them at some facilities. We analyzed these instantly in terms of their CO2 emission impact. And this way they had a decision basis of what is the most favorable supply chain that they could implement for their rare earth metals. And it was all kinds of variations, sourcing and mining in Canada versus mining in Australia, processing facilities in country versus processing facilities in Norway, where there would be renewable energy, but different implications on logistics, for example. And within a week, they had that decision basis on what that supply chain for the future looks like, and they're now in the midst of implementing these changes. We have also, as a company, a very strong intention to enable our users wherever they sit. So for procurement professionals, we're enabling this in the ERP system or in any other system where our customer's procurement department works. But for the product engineers, we help early on in the design phase by being integrated with solutions like Autodesk, where our data is directly being pushed into the 3D design. And we also help your corporate carbon accounting with partnerships like with Wolters Kluwer's, who have a comprehensive platform for sustainability reporting and ESG reporting, and where we fit in the granular data that only we can measure at this scale. A very relatable case to the Scope 3 challenges that you probably face today is our work with Vestas. They had basically a very strong incentive to change their Scope 3 accounting because they had taken on certain financing for the wind parks that were tied to green goals. And their current reporting system did not allow for the granularity to, on one hand, set reliable targets, and on the other hand, manage reductions in a forecastable manner. And therefore, they were faced with finding a new solution. But looking at solving this themselves was really tough because they had their data scattered across 15 different systems, and it was a large volume of different components that you can imagine go in these wind turbines and wind parks. The solution that we provided for them was really getting all these data streams together from these data sources where their relevant data lied, and the ability to, after an implementation, deliver fully transparent and supplier-specific supply chains for every single dollar that they spent. So they were able to actually now to analyze any impact of supplier, material, or technology changes for every product that they have in the organization, and that they were able to actually run reports across their entire org and analyze where they could save both carbon and cost, or where there would be trade-off benefits. With that, they're now able to actually report fully automated, satisfying all the reporting standards that are now and that are upcoming in the next years. And their procurement department and their product design department has actionable data whenever they need to make a decision on a more sustainable material and a more sustainable supplier. What I would want to do now to round this up shortly is to give you an idea of how it actually looks like if you're faced with such a decision within our platform and give you a tangible experience. For that, I want to show you our platform itself. This is Makersite, and Makersite, as mentioned, is not only looking at sustainability. We have over 50 different applications that our user group can analyze products and supply chains with that are categorized in business, environment, health, and safety regulations. There's a lot of functionalities that I could show you in this platform, and it will probably take an hour and a half. And if you're interested after today's session and the panel to find out more, I'm happy to do so in a one-on-one session with you. But what I really wanted to show you how you can leverage this platform if you're faced with a procurement decision. Once implemented, Makersite holds actually every information, or every product that you're purchasing will be as an inventory within Makersite. And you can easily then just query up a product when you actually need to run an analysis. You can do this by a manufacturer part number, or you can do this by name. What I want to show you an example of is integrated circuit from Texas Instruments. Now, what you get when you open that up, it basically shows you a bunch of different data points that you can look at. You will see in what products this is actually used that you have within your organization. You have some technical specifications and so on. I can analyze this purchase component now across various categories. And the reason that I can do that is that we connect to so many databases that we actually can show you more visibility on how this integrated circuit is made up. and therefore give you insights as well about the sustainability impact, its compliance profile, its risk profile, and how much it should cost. You, as an organization, when you look at your integrated circuit in your ERP system, you'll most likely just know you buy it from Texas Instruments. You may know its weight, but you will not know how it is. You will not know how it is made, for example. I can get instantly an overview across these various dimensions if I want. I can drill into the supply chain by identifying which are the suppliers that I'm actually working with, or who potentially are other suppliers that I could talk to that are supplying to Texas Instruments. I can get an understanding of how much the product should cost. I can understand how much the CO2 emissions actually are of this semiconductor. And I can have a look at the substance risks and the regulations that apply. What I want to show you is how we can now analyze this device, this integrated circuit, from a sustainability point, and how it actually works looking at it from multiple criteria. What we have instantly available here is the carbon emissions that arise from the purchased good, the integrated circuit. But we also see how it is made, a visibility that you usually would not have in your ERP system. And we can identify where the biggest chunk of carbon is coming from. Manufacturing energies play a big role, but actually the doped silicon is the largest contributor. Makersite, through the rich databases that we connect to, allows us to drill into this much further. And what that enables you to do is actually have much better quality conversations with your suppliers, especially when you look at products where you have an impact of how they could be manufactured, or where you have an impact of how your suppliers should be sourcing, because it enables you to have a conversation about where they could be sourcing from and where it would be more sustainable for them to maybe source a certain electrode, source a certain chemical, and so on. Because it enables you, as you can see here, to drill into the product supply chain down to level 6, while we're actually in your ERP system, you would just be able to see level 1 as of today. And you might have systems that enable you to understand who's your tier 2 supplier as well, maybe sometimes even tier 3, but very hard to go beyond these levels and then understand these different multitudes of dimensions. Now, what I can do with this model as well is make direct changes. So if you're involved in the design choices, for example, with your supplier, you can let them know what other materials they could, for example, use, or you could help your product engineers how they could manufacture things differently, or give them guidance. I can make what-if decisions in this model fairly easily by choosing, for example, a different material or choose a different supplier. And the model will tell me right away what reductions I achieve in terms of the category that I'm looking at, which is in this case CO2. Now, as mentioned before, we at Makersite are absolutely convinced the future does not lie in you procurement professionals just being able to look at sustainability as a criteria. You need to be able to really understand as well what actually are the commercial implications, the regulatory implications, and so on. And for that, we have a multi-criteria scoring system that is really, really easy to understand, especially for non-experts. If I have this integrated circuit, I can go and analyze how it performs against another product of the same sort. And I can basically say, do I have another integrated circuit of the same kind that I want to get a look at in comparison? And I actually do. Here from a dummy corporation in our demo account, we have the ACME corporation, and I can compare both of them. What I see here is a comparison based on solely one criteria, different sustainability impact methods. Not relevant, we've already looked at it. But I can actually look at it across various different dimensions. And this is basically our multi-criteria decision analysis, where I can look at different criteria and there's a scoring system behind it. How does the scoring system work? I can firstly decide what criteria I want to actually look at. In procurement, you will probably not want to look at hazardness. You may not want to look at human health things, because these are things that you're already checking your materials on early on in the design stage or in product management. But you would probably look at price information. You would want to look at regulation. So we can score the regulatory profile. We can look at the material costs. We can add all kinds of different things. I can add these criteria, and I can then go to back to the overview. And now I'm considering regulation and material cost as well. So I have basically a scoring system of what should be my ideal company to source from for this integrated circuit based on my criteria. I can also decide, do I actually want to weigh them all at the same time, or do I may want to give chemical risks or materials a higher score, a higher weighting? This would then as well maybe favor another supplier over the other, given that you as a company deem sustainability more relevant than cost, for example, or vice versa. And this is how you can easily mirror your company's strategy in a decision matrix in our platform and get your procurement professionals in your organization an easily consumable decision matrix and a score with which they can go by, use them in supplier conversations, and use them in decision making. With that, I hope I gave you a good glimpse of how other companies from different industries are doing already today quite a big chunk of, on one hand, scaling scope 3 across their organization and really using technology to reduce emissions on a daily basis by especially equipping the procurement professionals with the right data to make decisions. The rest, I would say for the next 10, maybe 12 minutes, we can keep it open for questions. And with that, I hand over back to Mitch, our moderator.
Thanks, Julian. Great presentation there. So we have a few questions from the audience. We'll start with Thomas. So he said, thanks for the invitation and your presentation. Can your system handle primary data from the different suppliers on actual CO2 emissions? So in combination with information from a database on CO2, where we have information based on energy mix for relevant region/industry, but never the real emission from these suppliers. So
yes, so good question, Thomas. And the simple answer is yes. We are a platform that helps our customers right now measure already all their components across the organization, but a large chunk is secondary data, the data that comes from scientifically verified databases that is as accurate as you can get it today if there's no primary data, but this is not where you want to end up. You want to end up in a world in 5 years' time, maybe earlier, maybe a bit later, where most of your suppliers have actually shared primary data. We facilitate that with a systematic questionnaire approach, where you can choose to, on a semi-annual basis or annual basis, for example, send out questionnaires to each of your suppliers for every component that you buy from them. And they will have a digital interface from Makersite where they can upload their product carbon footprint data, so their CO2 emissions, and Makersite automatically generates a primary data object once that supplier has submitted their CO2 emissions for the products that they supply to you. And this is how our customers, for example, Vestas, who have hundreds of thousands of suppliers around the world, do this at scale, ease basically the load on procurement to get this information in your ERP system, and basically enable, on one hand, with a system like ours, to measure everything already today, but clearly succeed in increasing accuracy year over year. And maybe to round that question up, even though that was not asked, bear in mind that also if you are in procurement, there's always a power dynamic with your suppliers. When you don't have any data yourself, it's harder to push your suppliers to actually submit you carbon emissions. But if you actually analyze your supplier's performance with a system like ours, and you confront them with these numbers, it changes the narrative. It changes the power dynamic, because now you can tell them, hey, well, either way, you measured upon this result, or you actually give us a real result. And mostly companies do not like being measured on something that they have no control over.
Okay, another question from Martin. Who takes responsibility for data accuracy? Who is legally responsible for claims made? And then think CO2 reduction claims, modern slavery, etc. So good question.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of liability, there are different steps, I would say, but generally the data that we ingest into our platform, that we enrich our customers' data with, these are all premium and verified databases. We make transparent where that data is coming from, who are our data partners, and these are all typical databases, such as, for example, EcoInvent, for which you typically would buy a user license, and which are databases that are accepted by all the verifying and certifying parties when it comes to ISO standard of a product carbon footprint, for example, or when it comes to building up a scope 3 report that adheres to SBTi targets or the GHG protocol. When it comes to the output of our system, because we're basically enriching your data at scale through AI and machine learning, you can take our results and verify and certify them. You can either way do that by going with each result to a certifier, and from that point on, the liability, once your results are certified, there's no liability on your end, because you've done the part of certification. You can also certify the system with which you generate these results if there's an automation involved that we provide, where the system of ours would be audited, and every output is then by default certified, for example. So this is how you can solve this this entire dynamic around ownership of liability. Yeah, hope that answers the question. Otherwise, please pose a follow-up in the Q&A.
Sure. It doesn't look like we've got any more questions. Any more? No. Okay, fantastic. So thanks for answering that, Julian. So we're going to move on to our executive panel now. So we're going to be welcoming onto the stage Dario Kulic, who is a Global Director of Procurement and Global Process Owner at Elanco. Magdalena Shakalis, who's Head of Procurement for British American Tobacco, and Gert Burhatz, who is Head of Procurement and Sustainability Risk Lead at UCB. The panel is going to be moderated by Julian this afternoon. So Julian, I will leave it with you to take it from there.
Thank you, Mitch.
Welcome, guys.
Hey there, Magdalena. Hey, Gert. Hey, Dario. Thanks so much from myself and Makersite that you're participating in today's panel. We're really interested what you can share with the group and the audience today as procurement leaders about your experience and your thoughts on procurement in a company's sustainability journey. To kind of kick things off, I'd like to get an understanding from you guys what you currently deem the biggest challenge for procurement when it comes to implementing a sustainability and net zero plan or strategy. Maybe we can start off with you, Magdalena.
Hello, hi, good afternoon, everyone. From my side, if you asked me a few years ago, that would be probably the stakeholders buy-in, awareness, or even resources. But from my experiences, we currently passed beyond this point, and we have, especially in the big corporations, enough support at all levels up to the management board to make sure that everyone is behind sustainability as a front and center, like we say in BET, of everything what we do. So I also see a lot of ESG focused roles being set up. So I think we do have the momentum in terms of buy-in and resources. And I think for procurement, what is currently the biggest challenge in my view is actually the knowledge. So the knowledge gap around the tools like your own, about the challenges that we can actually effectively address short-term, mid-term, long-term, and the knowledge how to collaborate, not only internally with our other functions, but also with the suppliers. Because like you mentioned in your discussion, it's a conversation with the suppliers and the joint journey that we need to have with them. So this education needs to happen within procurement communities and within the suppliers themselves. So I think the sooner we close the knowledge gap, the faster and better we will be able to address the opportunities here as procurement.
Very interesting, Magdalena. It's good to hear that the times have changed and that by now in organizations there's already enough support for sustainability, and that's not the part of the fight anymore. And it's a topic that's more front of center. And interesting points from you. What is challenging, and especially having that knowledge gap in terms of the supplier collaboration and managing different stakeholders. Interested to hear, Gert, what your view on it is, being from a different industries, more from a pharmaceutical side of things.
Yeah, so I think, to me, one of the biggest challenges is indeed related to one of the last questions that you received from the audience, and that's about actual emissions, because that makes it harder, especially when you look at from the services side, so not from the production side, but from a services side, is how to otherwise differentiate. Like, for instance, I've had a long history in travel, in our company, for instance. Travel is a very good example. If you do the post-travel reporting, the only really reliable data right now is to calculate it based on the number of kilometers traveled, but that doesn't really reflect correctly what type of airplane is used, what is the load factor, was there any other considerations such as sustainable aviation fuel being used, etc. So it kind of makes it hard then to steer the business, because you cannot with this absolute certainty say, like, if you choose another solution, you are going to have a better result in the CO2 emissions. To me, that is definitely more everything related with services rather than actual goods, because indeed in goods you can probably get to a better point, as you showed with your tools that you propose, but in the services that is still an issue. So to me, the biggest challenge is to obtain actual emission data.
Interesting. Dario, given I know it's not the same company, but I know that your organization is also a pharmaceutical company. Are these similar challenges that you're facing, like that, or is there something else that you see in your industry?
Yeah, can you hear me? Actually,
we can hear you well. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I had just some audio issues. So hi everybody. Yeah, I mean, I can echo actually on both sides. Yeah, from what I heard from Magda and also what I heard from Gert, and I can just say we are in the same challenge actually at the moment, that yes, we are getting now these goals, targets, what we have to achieve, and we have to roll it out and to implement it. But as Magdalena said, the knowledge is not completely there. So this needs to be, so talking about knowledge is also explaining for somebody in procurement why this is actually needed, which data is needed, and what we actually will do with this data in order to translate it to actions, where these actions actually will then decisions, right? So this whole chain actually needs first to be really explained, and I think that's not so easy. So it's nothing that you will do just in a few weeks. So this is I think it's also kind of a mindset change. So you need to really train and educate now, so that this sitting with the people forever now for the future. So it's not just a one-time activity. And this is important. I mean, if it would be a one-time activity, it's useless, right? So it must be sustainable. And I also agree to Gert. Oh, this is difficult. How do you actually translate this into emissions if you're buying services mainly? Yeah, I mean, I can understand this with the travel. Yeah? I mean, travel would be really good. Let's say if you would say, Gerd, okay, you are now traveling only 5 times a year and not 10 times anymore. Okay, you could do some absolute figure, let's say, calculation, yeah, more or less. So, but how about you buy a service, and how do you translate this into emission reduction? Huh? So this will become very complex and interesting, basically. The understanding also how the suppliers today work, not only from a production side, but also from maybe from their own administration side, and where they are maybe producing too much energy and emissions and so on, and where then in a corporation improvements can be done on both sides, which then would eventually lead again to emission and reductions. But here again, this is a very interesting topic, how this will be calculated later on.
Interesting. Thank you, Dario. And I think the point of what you mentioned in terms of analyzing why is something needed, who needs it, and for what is it needed, sets it up very well for the next question that I'd be interested to find out from you guys. Given all these challenges, how can sustainability become very short-term already a fixed criterion in the procurement process of goods and also services, actually? And what do you see happening in your organizations maybe already, if you see some best practices? Gert, you're raising your finger. So
yeah, I thought like I could give you something that we have just recently started. So don't ask me yet what the exact result is going to be over time. But so we have been making sure that we got the right buy-in, as Magdalena was saying, that is nowadays already easier than it used to be. And we have introduced what we call green weighting rules, meaning that people will judge suppliers as they usually judge them, but then based on whether they are SBTI or not, whether they have committed to firm and verifiable reductions, we will then put a multiplication factor on their results. We have made how do you call that, like a subdivision on where companies would be on their way to SBTI, because otherwise it would be yes or no. We wanted to have a little bit more nuance, so we really and if a company has really not taken any actions or is not yet doing, which unfortunately still happens, especially in some of the service industries, then at that point it needs specific authorization from our CPO, who will then judge, like, is there really no other supplier that could do it, which has a better score in sustainability? And that is how we are now rolling that out, and are going to be following that up on a very regular basis.
Can I ask maybe something, Gerd?
Sure.
This is very interesting what you really explained now, and I'm even not there yet, so I have to actually really to develop this whole thing, because we are just rolling it out. But what you just said is also very interesting. The first thing is supplier evaluation. Yes, you're right. If you want to implement this to be sustainable, it will have to change the today's or current supplier evaluation structure, yeah, or grid, or the criteria you use. But now again, my first question would be, if you put in now the criteria of emission, maybe, or let's say reduction of some kind of a key metric, yeah, which will give you your progress actually to get to net zero. So how do you measure this actually? How do you measure now if a supplier has, let's say, 60% of this, or 80%, yeah, or is he just at 10%? So
I see what you mean. So we go from the principle in SBTI, there are very strict rules. When people want to submit there, they need to have a very specific plan. So of course we cannot know whether they are, or we don't have the bandwidth to audit whether they are actually doing all those actions. We have to trust that there is some control out of SBTI there. But then, in order to evaluate whether, as I said, to zero or not, we go through a questionnaire that we developed together with easy questionnaire. I think it's 7 questions or something like that. It's more like, are you measuring? are you not, do you have a reduction plan? Have you got a target on your reduction plan? Because there's a difference between saying like, yeah, we're going to reduce, and then saying, no, we're going to reduce to 50%, for instance.
Absolutely.
And so every time it goes a step higher. And so the ultimate goal is that they are then a supplier level A, and A would mean that they have firm SBTi targets committed with SBTi. The only exception that we make is if we see that a company really can show us with internal documents or whatever that they have like exactly done the same thing, but because they're an SME, for instance, they haven't taken the trouble to go to SBTi, and there's a cost to it, and then they need to do all kinds of things. So then we will accept them as like SBTi, but that is really only acceptable for smaller companies. For larger companies, and we are getting quite some traction internally with that, because it's very reasonable. It's we're not saying like they cannot be chosen, because the second part of the whole equation is that if they are not where they need to be and the business still feels that they need to work with them, then we agree with the business that together with procurement we will do quarterly or half-yearly reviews with the companies to measure their progress, and they are then asked in their contract to put a commitment that they will work on it, and that they give us the possibility to cancel the contract without negative impact on UCB if they do not deliver on their commitments. So that's how we work it. So it's not just the measuring and saying yes or no, but also the plan behind it afterwards, so that we can support the companies as well.
No, great. Thank you for this. But for me, this sounds you are already far advanced on the track. Yeah. So, so the thing is, you did already at some point, I don't know how many years ago or days or weeks, you already defined for yourself how you are going to measure a supplier when you source them in terms of the sustain. So this is actually good. And this also means to me now that you're really actively doing this now for all supplier sourcings.
Yeah. Indeed.
Yeah, but this is you already far advanced in my eyes.
And I think also maybe adding, because we as a solution provider, we see this, of course, with a large range of companies out there. I think the data will become more granular, what is available in the future. And then you're also able to enhance this metrics now, right?
Yeah.
But I think the starting point that Gert has mentioned is a good one, because it enables objectivity. If you make too strict numerical expectations now, you'll probably have just 3-4% of your suppliers adhering to it, and you can't make it a decision criterion. So very, very good insight, Gert. Magdalena, how is it outside of the pharmaceutical? How it is outside of the pharmaceutical world at BAT? What do you see?
It's very accurate for us, because the discussion that Gert just mentioned, we just had it, last week, in terms of how to balance the simplicity of short list of punchy questions, very easy to understand, relevant, and easy also for people to relate to, against a more diverse and adjusted approach, depending on our purchasing power, depending on the category strategy, how much we can really influence the suppliers on the other side, how big are those organizations, and can we actually make those expectations different, depending whether we talk with a large scale supplier that should be much more advanced than some smaller scale organizations where we would hope for them to perhaps be in a different level of this maturity. So there are various approaches and pros and cons, but what we agreed is that it will not be one criteria and one set of questions fitting all. And we also agreed that the faster we can move toward a minimum selection criteria, where actually, even if it's a smaller group of suppliers, but within the categories that have the biggest impact on our emissions, scope 3, the faster we can get there and say, if you don't meet certain minimum criteria, and those criteria can evolve, right? Like Bert mentioned, at some point it can be, you know, are you committed to do something within 12 months, right? And then in 12 months it can become, do you have this and this in place? But the faster we can get to the point where you will only be able to get access to our business and our contract if you met those criteria, the bigger and faster impact we can make, yes, and it will not be a greenwashing anymore, but a real impact on commercials, right? The same way how we have minimum standards in terms of fair sourcing practices, in terms of, you know, different aspects of ESG elements. The same can apply for scope 3 emissions, and that also we need to integrate not only into sourcing, right? We often say, how can we integrate it into sourcing? But we also discuss that this needs to be an ecosystem of KPIs, an ecosystem of decision points that are related to where the potential or existing supplier sits. So it needs to be part of a category strategy. It needs to be part of a supplier management and monitoring, reporting, engagement. So it's the whole design of the interactions and performance, not only sourcing part. Yeah. So those were our reflections on that.
I agree to this absolutely. I mean, this what you just said in the end, especially, it can actually only work if you have already a preferred supplier list, let's say, a structure and a process for this. If you have category strategies, all this already actually as the base, because then you also know how you are going forward with the sourcing and your supplier selection. And as you also said, this so ecosystem, actually, it is also always in line with business together, right? And I personally see not just procurement being able to bring this down. Yeah, so of course procurement will be the party with the most power when it comes to supplier, let's say, negotiation power, selection, and so on and so on. But I see also manufacturing on our side. Yeah, so we have a few big manufacturing sites, and I don't know what their specific goals are, but they will have goals, which will definitely also lead to reduction of emissions. But what I'm seeing here as well is that procurement can partner internally as well. Yeah, so with manufacturing, looking with them into production processes, what could be changed and what would this change actually entail, and would then a new supplier be needed, or is the current supplier can be changed also on his side so that the production is easier. So I see this, but I see also supply chain, and we are very heavily in supply chain because we have a lot of intercompany business also for our final. So final products which we are shipping also between our other affiliates. And here the point is, with all these disruptions and quick changes which are at the moment coming, we had to increase also the air freight very often. And air freight, this is a high impact on emissions. Not only cost, it's also a high impact on emissions. And I think here supply chain definitely can also work to get this again streamlined to a point. So they need to find a way, because we are now in the new world, new time, so as it is, but this is what I'm seeing as well. But here, then the last part, what I'm seeing is the normal business users, so all the other employees in the company, everybody can also do some kind of a contribution to something what will eventually reduce emission. And if this is just a trivial thing, I'm leaving the office in the last one, I'm switching off the light. Just very simple. So if I'm doing this 365 times or 200 times a year, you reduced. So if everybody doing it, we all reduced. And I think there are plenty of examples which can be really done. So therefore I'm seeing, procurement has a big part of it, but I think internally in a company, there can be also other parts which can contribute and drive forward.
Yeah, very, very, very good answer. And I think especially that internal partnering that leads me exactly to my next question, because what we see from our side with companies is procurement is very different in its role and in its importance than 10, 20 years ago, and especially the influence that procurement nowadays has in terms of how new products are influenced, not generally just when products are at market and things need to be procured, but early on in the design decision, involving procurement being already a driver of what is in the realms of possibility in terms of the materials that can be sourced. Is this strategically the right way? And there I would be very interested to hear from you guys. How can procurement better collaborate with product development and product management teams, especially on the sustainability initiatives? Maybe I hand it directly there to you, Dario, because you initiated that part already.
Sure. So I can give you a practical example of how it was done and how I did it in a previous company. So as I said, Elanco is yet, let's say, in the starting shoes, right? So, but when I worked for Toyota, for example, in the automotive, and before all the sustainability topics came up, automotive industry already conducted kind of these surveys with their suppliers. So they went through tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, up to all the tiers where the supplier actually has all his sub-suppliers, right? And with this analysis, procurement already had the chance to see, right, so my supplier is now buying it internally from this manufacturing site and this, but by the way, he has actually also a manufacturing site which is much closer, could do the same as well. Yeah, so you reduce already logistics, and this is the starting point. Yeah, but going into this really tier down, then you can also see it on a material basis. Huh? So where all the materials are coming from, which are actually having the longest ways, which could be actually replaced by other factories, and which could maybe also be exchanged. And here, the thing with the exchange of materials is, yep, in the procurement, if you are not able technically to understand at least specifications and some drawings, then it will be difficult to talk to your product developers, or to your engineers. And so in my past in Toyota, it was always I checked on my parts, commodities which I bought or purchased, on the drawings and the specs, what could be potentially changed. Yeah? And with those proposals, I actually went to the engineers. But I had also to explain it in a professional way to them, because otherwise, you're getting lost. Then they can also tell you everything and anything, even if it's true or not. But if you have this knowledge, then you can start and have these mutual conversations and drive then something forward.
Very interesting, and thanks for that insight as well from the past company out of the automotive space. Kat, how do you see it on your end? What are things that you're seeing based on own experiences, or things where you see improvement potential of how procurement can be better embedded with product development and product management on this journey?
I think in a lot of for the pharmaceutical industry, I think we have to distinguish the core product, where I do not believe we can have as much of an impact. We develop, in our case, for instance, biopharmaceuticals to treat things like epilepsy, Parkinson's. It's not, and I don't want to be disrespectful to them, but it's not like, for instance, if you make beer and you can maybe change the hop a little bit, or where you buy things, and it would not make a major difference, maybe a little bit in the taste. But in our case, it needs, since all these drugs go through all the clinical research, and so you cannot change anything at the drug itself. And sometimes you're even restricted on way of packaging, not the carton around it, but for instance, if it goes into a certain flask, there are limitations on it. You cannot just change it very easily. So, but there, I think you can do it, but it's never quick. I think in other industries, you can move a lot faster. What we would be able to do is to look at, okay, does this packaging, for instance, has a major influence on the product? No. Okay, well, then we have to go through the whole, they call it GXP program, where you have to, go through quality assurance, etc. And so it can take easily up to a year before you are then authorized to switch it over. But we are definitely looking at that. But what we see is that it's often very, very, very long and very specialized, because procurement can challenge, but it's seldom that you have a person that is so well into this matter that they can really challenge very effectively. Let's put it that way. It's a lot easier with a lot of the other stuff as a procurement, but not for us. It's very hard. But we're definitely looking into it.
I feel you in everything you said.
Interesting view, and maybe handing over to you, Magdalena, when you share your view on it. I would assume, maybe I'm wrong there, but then the tobacco industry, there's also quite some regulation, maybe not as much as the pharmaceutical side, but is that also something that you see as a challenge when you're trying to impact the product development side from a procurement perspective?
The grass is always greener on the other side, right? Unless you go on the other side and you see it's not as easy as you thought. So I think we all have our own challenges. But on this particular question, I think that it very much depends on the maturity of your function, right? In our organizations, to be honest, it is a little bit business as usual. We work very closely with our product teams already, and the only difference is that now we will kind of incorporate into our tracking, monitoring, development cycles, the initiatives that are focused on ESG and sustainability outcomes rather than savings, for example, or along. But we mirror exactly the same ways of working as we have in terms of collaboration, tracking, prioritizing, escalation. So exactly the same ways of working for sustainability focused initiatives as with the ones that we have for savings. And that we are very mature on, so that can we tap in and benefit from all the years of experience of working together, but putting a different mindset and a different hat on.
Thank you, Magdalena. Interesting, very interesting insights, I think, from the panel. Thanks to all of you there. I think the overall mantra is really about, on one hand, I think it becomes clear that it's at the forefront of mind that sustainability arrived in procurement now, at least when you fully embraced it in the way that you did in the panel so far. On the other side, it's clear that it's a lot about complex stakeholder management across not only your suppliers, but as well internally. Before we round off, and I as well maybe hand the audience the possibility to ask you one or two questions, is there a tip that you can give your fellow procurement peers as they lead their companies to a net zero journey? Maybe something for people that are really at the beginning of it, or having some challenges that you may have had in the past.
You mean a tip like something like don't become an alcoholic, things like that, because you
I leave it up to you.
You sometimes at the end of the day need a drink, so that is definitely a danger. It is challenging. I think that's the best tip you can give to people. Take it in strides. Don't let it get personal. Everybody is probably a little bit worried about change, so change is not going to happen overnight. And I'm the best example for that, because at work I always want to change things, and I'm fully into these change things. But God forbid it if something at home changes. So I mean, it's very human that people are a bit resistant to change. So you really need to go for it, but don't get discouraged and don't take it personally. That would be my best my best suggestion.
Yeah, I would just add on this one. So Gert, you just said it. Yeah, so I think for me the most important thing is the change management. So the change management process, and also what I described with explaining first to people what is this actually all about, why is this needed, which data we will need, and what we are doing then with this data, and how we translate this into action. So this isn't, I mean, this is an end-to-end process. Yeah? This takes some time, and this is what I would do. I would really take this time. The time in the beginning, and even if it is more than 1 month, so it doesn't matter. But if you don't do this in the beginning, it will just have repercussions through the whole process. And yeah, I think in my sense, this is anyway also built as needed here, and this is what I will do.
From my side, probably be humble about what you know, what you don't know, and the progress you make. Yes, because anything you do, it's very easy. A lot of time, a lot of work, and then it's very easy to step back. So whatever progress you do, to make it sustainable, be open in terms of what you know, what you don't know, and who can help to get you where you need to go.
Yeah. Absolutely agree. And then for me, there's also a big difference between, let's say, me as an expert knowing all the things, explaining it, and actually know it by heart. Yeah, but there's always this you need to be aware that not everybody knows it like this, and is able also to adapt to it so quickly. Yeah, so this is then again, being humble, being humble and kind with this change management. Yeah, and even use it 2 or 3 times, and wait, be patient, so people will not just switch off or switch on, so from 1 second to another.
I like that. Summarizing what you just said, I think this is a good advice on every journey, such as complex as the one ahead of you. Time, patience, tolerance, and humility when you're managing and navigating your organization through this process. We are at the end of our panel today, and I want to thank you, Magdalena, Dario, and Gert. It was a pleasure getting your insights from what you've experienced on that journey and the outlook that you have right now. Are there any questions from the audience? If yes, type them in the Q&A very fastly before we round up. Otherwise, thank you for the organization to the Synergy Group, and let us know after the session if there's any questions that you have to us, but also maybe to the panelists, and the folks from Synergy will pass these on. I don't see anything from the chat at the moment. Then I will hand it to you, Mitch, for putting in the closing words.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming along today, our audience members, panel, and also Julian as well. Much appreciated. Hope everyone's enjoyed the session this afternoon, and hopefully we'll look forward to seeing some more of you really soon. So have a good afternoon and take care.